Hello folks. Today I'd like to do a quick and easy scope mount on a Ruger 1022. Most rifles are somewhat similar. In the way they mount may be a little different. Now, I went and bought a mount specially for the 1022, made to fit right on it. But when you get your 1022, it's quite likely it'll have 4 screws, just little flathead slotted screws in the top of the receiver here. Now we've got to take those out. So we're just going to back all those out real quick. Helps to have a magnetic screwdriver, maybe. I don't magnetize mine because they pick up iron filings and all sorts of stuff. But we'll take these 4 little screws out. And I purchased a Weaver rail because either I've lost it, this gun didn't come with one, some do, some don't, I guess. But I purchased a Weaver rail just for this gun, and it goes on as such, and it came with 4 screws of its own. And I've tried it before, but yeah, this rail will only mount on here one way correctly, it appears, like that. Now, I assembled all the tools before I started this, so I've got all the screwdrivers and such. And there's 4 of these little screws that come with this mount. And we're just going to start them. I have this handy dandy fits all screwdriver and several little bits. It's quite handy actually to have all the little bits that fit several different screws. I guess if you're going to do a lot of this, they make a gunsmithing kit, probably similar to this. I've got usually plenty tools to do whatever I try to tackle. Sorry to bore you with this, but it is what it is. If you have any question about your screw starting correctly, back the screw up as if you're taking it out, and you'll feel it drop down into the threads. Then you can turn it right hand direction. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. I'm snugging them all down now. I'm not taking them too tight just yet. I want to get them all basically seated. Then we'll go back, and I like to start toward the inside and start putting some torque on them. I can't tell you how much. I'm not using a torque wrench, just good and snug. Good and snug. Now I'm going to apply a pretty good amount of pressure on them, get them tight. Just make sure everything's locked down. And by the way, we're dry fitting this to make sure everything works out. We would later disassemble all this and use a thread locking compound, commonly referred to as Loctite. but that's a brand name. Alright, we've got our rail mounted. Now, I already have these scope mounts. I don't know where I got them. I had them, quite honestly. But with these, with the bolts protruding past the mount underneath, you can only mount these at these two slots. There's different kinds, different colors, different styles, different, you name it. We're going to get that seated down on there, sitting in that groove. Going to snug it down a little bit. I'm going to take the other one. It takes 2 per scope. And we're going to get it over that slot. And you'll see that it won't slide either way. It's in that slot. Take that tight. Okay. Here we have it. The bases are mounted. The bottom half of the rings can be called several things. Now, I happened into a good deal the other day on a Burris scope. We're not going to go into scope brands or anything at this point. This is just a high magnification scope. It's a telescopic sight. It's a 6 power to 18 power with an adjustable objective. The objective is this large end, and you can set it for your yardage, as you can see here. Now, mounting the scope. The scope is in the rings. We need to take the top half of the rings and we need to get them set on. Then I'm going to take my multi-driver, and I have the appropriate Allen head or hex, internal hex. We're going to start those screws. Just get them started good. Don't need to get them tight just yet. We're going to set the other cap on. Do the same with it. See, that's magnetized, and you can see little metal filings sticking to it. Now, when you get your scope ring caps on, there's always going to be a little gap in between the cap and the base. There's always going to be that little gap. It's a little hard to see in this video probably, but you want the gap to be even on both sides. Okay, now that we've got them started, it's crucial that you get your scope rolled right in them. In other words, you don't want it like that, cocked at an angle. You want it as close to plumb and level. And they make devices you can use. I use my eyeball, and I'm usually within reason, but you want it level, plumb, square with the gun, so that when you're shooting, everything is as it should be, straight up and down, left and right. Okay, now that we've got that determined, we're going to take this down a little closer. Like I said, I'm trying to keep my gap evened up on these. So I'm taking it a little bit on each side. Okay, that one's snug. And you can use an Allen wrench if that's what you've got, a little 90-degree Allen wrench. This is just handier. We're going to take them a little bit and a little bit, good and snug. You don't need to try and crush the scope. Good and snug. good and snug. Now, one thing I should point out, before you take these down this tight, you need to check your eye relief. Your relief is the distance from this scope to your eye. It's typically in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 4.5 inches. Your scope paperwork will tell you, or I found it's much better to actually shoulder the gun with these loose and make sure you're getting the full field of view. You can slide it back and forth till you find out where your eye sees the entire circumference of the scope. What happens is, if you get it too far away from you, it'll draw up, the aperture will draw up smaller, and it'll be all black around the outside, and you'll have one little hole to look through. But when you get it to the right eye relief, it'll open up and you can see the entire circumference of the scope. You'll see what I'm talking about when you go to doing it. But you want these snug down for that. But once you get that determined, go ahead and crank it down tight. And we're going to take a screwdriver and we're going to tighten these mounts down just a little more. And we're going to make sure that everything is kosher. Take it out, shoot it once if you want. Things may slightly move. But at this point, you would disassemble it all, start over, using thread locker, because you've got stuff pretty close. And that way nothing can move on you. And there you have a scope mounted on your rifle. And this one's a big critter. Now it does clear the barrel. I didn't have to fold the sight down or anything. So it all works. Seems like it's going to work well. I got to get it to the range and do some firing and see how far off we are. That's another topic. Thanks for joining us. Come back soon. I'm sure we'll have something you like.